So before we get started today, I just have a few items to go over. The webinar today is being recorded and it will be posted to our MDE LIO video library. Any questions that you have today, you can use the Q&A feature, and if time permits at the end, we will address those questions. If you've requested professional development credits when you joined, then your attendance will be confirmed via timestamp. And then at the end of today, which concludes this series, there will be an email that comes out shortly with instructions on how to obtain those credits. So as the screen indicates, making sure that everyone's accessibility needs are met is a top priority. And so before we dive in, we just want to make sure that everything you need is accessible. Captioning is available for this webinar. If you'd like to turn on the captions, you can click Show Captions on the bottom of your Zoom screen. And if you're not seeing that, you might need to use the three little dots that say More, and it will be under that tab. We also have interpreters on today's webinar. If you need to see them more clearly, you can click View in the top right corner and then select Gallery View and hide non-video participants. Additionally, we would ask that everyone keeps their video off so that only the presenters and the interpreters are visible. Lastly, we just want to share that you are able to adjust the video layout on your screen. If you hover on your screen right now, you should see some videos on the side and a shared PowerPoint. There's a line right in between, and if you hover over that, you can actually move and adjust that to make sure that it fits your needs. If you need any technical assistance during today's call, my colleague Amanda Schneider is here today, and she is running all things on the back end, and she can help you with your questions. So just send her a quick message. So before we get started with this topic today, I would like to hand this over to our director, Roxanne Balfour, to greet you.
All right, thank you, Kelly. Let me get my video going here. I'm so impatient. It's like double tap, and it's like, just stop tapping. So this is going to be a great topic to finish up the year with our Live with LIO for DHH. There's so much that we think we know, but there's so much more we need to do. And we find that out in our office where we go and we think we're covered. We've got, everything we need for communication, accessibility. And then somebody later on pulls us aside, well, not quite. So this will be a good learning opportunity for everyone. We have got some great presenters today, so I'm not going to go and name through everybody as they're going to introduce themselves. But I do appreciate their time and all of you for joining us, not for this one alone, but for all the others this past year. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, I believe, Kelly. Thanks, everyone.
Kelly, thank you, Roxanne. So as the screen shared outlines, those are our objectives for today and our agenda. And so on that note, we're just going to dive right in. The next slide will highlight for you who our featured panelists are for today. I am so excited to bring to you three teacher consultants from the field who are just going to share their experiences supporting students who are DHH-Plus, as well as Beth Kennedy from Deafblind Central, as well as Sarah Pericolosi from Alt Shift. They're just going to share additional resources that are available on this topic. So we're going to take a moment and let each of our panelists just introduce themselves. So ladies, if you could turn on your videos one at a time. I see lots of love in the comment section. Feel free to keep that going. Go ahead and just take a moment to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from and your role in deaf education, just one at a time. And if you could go in the order on the screen, that would be fantastic.
This is Heather Brass-Pennex. I am a teacher consultant for the deaf and hard of hearing from the Kent ISD Oral Deaf program. This is my 21st year of teaching. I spent the first 2 years with what was the Monroe County program for children with hearing impairments, a year in ECSE, and then 6 years as a preschool kindergarten teacher for the Oral Deaf program in Kent County. This is my 12th year as a teacher consultant, working with students anywhere from 3 years of age through transition post high school with all degrees of hearing loss, anywhere from monitoring to direct service.
Hi, this is Bethany Blindstrup. I'm a teacher consultant for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing in Midland County ESA. I've been here since 2010, so all of my babies are now reaching high school, which is really weird to me, but I've been loving seeing them grow over the years.
And I'm Leanne Hance. I'm teacher specialist, deaf and hard of hearing at the Allegan area ESA. I've been in this job for 10 whole years, and I have a couple of kids that I started with in like preschool, and now they're freshmen. It's wild. So I feel you, Bethany, on that.
This is Kelly. All right, thank you ladies so much. So just for our audience today, we are going to spend about the next 25 minutes or so with these featured panelists, sharing some strategies and tools and resources that they've personally utilized. And we hope that whether you are an experienced teacher or you're newer to your role, that you can walk away with some resources that will help you and you can use with your own caseload. So we'll start with our very first question on the next slide. What is DHH-Plus? And I just want to start this conversation by sharing that DHH-Plus, as presented on your screen, is an abbreviated way to say DHH plus, spelled out P-L-U-S. In print, it's common to see the plus spelled out. Similarly, when you write deaf or hard of hearing, the first time you always spell it out, and then you may abbreviate it DHH. So I just wanted to share that with you today. Maybe that's just a nugget of knowledge that you were wondering about. And also share with you that this phrase DHH plus is a term that is most widely used when referring to individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing and have some underlying medical issue or educational impact. And that could be physical, emotional, or a learning need that is not related to their hearing status. As professionals, it's really important that we consider our perspective of this term and recognize that our experience drives our reality. So I'd really like us all to take a moment, and I'm just gonna introduce an awkward silence and pause as we reflect on our own experiences and this phrase DHH plus and what that means to us. So I'll give us about 20 seconds to just reflect on that. Think of a student or students that you've worked with and how you might use this label. All right, now that we all have at least a student in mind or something, I just want to reiterate that research tells us that 40 to 60% of deaf and hard of hearing children have additional healthcare needs. Whether your experiences have been with students who are deaf and hard of hearing and have ADHD, or are deaf and autistic, or have a cognitive impairment, are deaf blind, have access to auditory input, or do not, are mainstreamed, or are center-based, or any other placement in between there. DHH plus is considered alternative language for the other potential labels such as deaf with additional disabilities or deaf disabled. And I think it's important that we remember as providers that labels and identity are deeply personal to individuals and to families. And sometimes labels change. So on that note, panelists, I want to invite you kind of to answer your first question. Do you have anything else that you would like to add to this conversation? Feel free to turn your videos on and introduce and say your name.
This is Leanne. When I was thinking about this particular question, I find that a lot of the time I want to apply it to those that are a lot farther along on the spectrum, right? Of like a really big impact. But the student that I have in mind for today is not one of those students. And I just think it's interesting that even my own definition, I tend to fall like deaf blind. I got it. You know, deaf and autistic. Yep. But some of those that are a little on the different like mainstream side, things like that, I haven't always thought about using that kind of terminology to describe them.
This is Kelly. Leanne, thank you so much for sharing that. I know that as a provider, I can relate to that. And I'm sure the others on the call can as well. Heather or Bethany, do you want to add anything?
This is,
I think
go ahead, Heather.
this is Heather. This question made me realize how many students on my caseload actually probably qualify as DHH plus. A third of my caseload is currently DHH plus with more significant needs, meaning autism, SXI, diagnosed secondary syndrome, cognitive impairment. And then I have a third that is DHH plus, maybe some articulation, maybe some OT. But that's still something else that we have to consider. And then only a third of my caseload is straight DHH, which is interesting for me to kind of think through and think about the impact.
I was going to say this. I'm sorry, this is Bethany. I was going to say the same thing as Heather and Leanne. Thinking about DHH plus, I was more thinking of like my students who have more severe needs, but taking in consideration those kids who are mainstreamed is really important too. So it was a good eye-opening even as a panelist.
Kelly, thank you, all three of you, for just adding to that conversation and also just for taking this time to be vulnerable and share your own learning and growing experiences. I think that there's something to be said when experienced educators in the field can come on and say, I'm still learning this too. It can make others that may be new to our field feel like they're not alone. And so I just appreciate you guys being vulnerable and sharing today. So on that note, I would like to just read a quote that is from the Hands and Voices website. And this is from a parent perspective, which I recognize we don't have here today on this call, but we traditionally have providers that sign up for this time. And my colleague Amanda Schneider does great things supporting parents. But as providers, we have to remember that parent perspective. So this is a quote on DHH Plus, and I'll read it to you. DHH Plus is meant to be a positive term, not in any negative way or insensitive way to the child who has a medical issue along with hearing loss. In fact, I see it as an A+ or B+, meaning the child carries additional positive qualities. But it is a gift that needs to be carefully unwrapped. And it may not appear to be a gift when you first receive it. Time helps you appreciate, understand, and unfold the possibilities. And the plus most often means the child and family have responsibilities and requires additional expertise. So thank you for letting me just share that quote with you. It's very powerful, and there's no other way that I could summarize that other than just including the quote there for you. All right, we are going to dive into this conversation with our experts from the field. So at this time, I'm going to invite all three of you. You've got your videos on. We're going to stop sharing the PowerPoint just so that your videos might be a little bit larger and more accessible for everyone. And the first question that I just want to ask all three of you, and you can take turns answering, is when thinking about today's topic, do you have a specific student that came to mind? And without sharing any personally identifiable information, can you just share a little bit about that student and what your kind of where your mindset is and what you're thinking about before you share some additional information today?
This is Heather. I can go. I had a lot of students that popped into my head, but I think that third of my caseload that is more significant needs. Those are the kiddos that immediately popped into my head because they have such a wider base of an IEP team that we're trying to work with. And right now I'm in the midst of some discussions and IEPs that are trying to coordinate all of that. So that's kind of high at the top of my head right now.
Yeah, this is Leanne. I had a couple different kids run through my mind, but one in particular is a 4-year-old. And we've just had a lot of really good things happen this year with her. And I was kind of excited to share with some other people the good things that have happened with this 4-year-old. So.
This is Bethany. I had a student from our middle school program, sorry, excuse me, from our middle school program who has a unilateral loss and has recently started using an interpreter as receptive language to gain receptive language, but uses a speech generated device for expressive output, which has been interesting. I've never done something like that with a student before, but she's been very successful.
Great. Thank you, ladies. I already know just from that little teaser that people want to know more. So let's dive into it. My next question for all of you is, talk to me a little bit about, you get a new student on your caseload or you're new to an IEP team. What resources do you find quickly or that you have available to help you kind of either provide support to this team or provide support to the student? So what do you automatically have access to? Let's talk about those things first. We'll get to what did you have to research and find on your own next.
That side research is always the extra part. This is Heather. The first thing that I have been doing more and more as my caseload is increasing is getting that release with their personal audiologist so that we can have that open line of communication. And with 2 students this year, that has actually been more through back and forth email, which has been really great. One, I see the student more than she does. So we've been able to work on some auditory strategies back and forth. And incorporating those within the student's classroom day, which has been great. The most difficult has definitely been trying to get everyone on board. So email, having some staffings set up, even if we don't always meet as a staff, but having a scheduled staffing once a month, and then discussing, a week before, hey, do we need to meet or not? But I think it's been a great opportunity to have all of those extra providers on board for a student. Utilizing all the things I use with my other students, using in our program, we use the castles as our framework and curriculum for auditory speech and language. And I'm still using that with my DHH-Plus kiddos. I'm just moving through it a little slower, but that's okay. Just meeting them where they need to be. But auditory training is always my first step, and making sure they have their equipment. And that explanation is getting to all of their staff and how to do that. I also send out bi-weekly tips to all the teachers and staff that work with my students. When you first in service those teachers, it's a lot to throw at them all at once. And so I try to send those tips just one little bullet at a time to help keep that communication going.
I love just the idea of not having, front loading with information with the in-service, but then breaking it down into small measurable pieces. And I hope that's a tip that someone can take away today of how to increase that communication and contact with the team members. And maybe you have to be the team member who initiates a staffing, a regular ongoing meeting. So just wonderful tips to take away. Thank you. Yeah. Leanne or Bethany, do you want to jump in?
Somebody who I reached out to initially when I started working with DHH-Plus was our OT and our speech pathologist. They had more experience than I did, so I just said, hey, let me pick your brain for a little bit and try and figure out some strategies that would work for our student. And they were always more than willing to help. So I think taking advantage of the people that you have around you in situations and case studies or cases like this that can just give you a little bit more guidance was really helpful for me at the beginning. I have also taken a class, and that has really guided a lot of my current thinking on how to help these students.
This is Leanne. I also rely a lot on the different people that we have. So like a lot of the time it'll be an early on family. And so we have our early on teams. I can use them for a lot of things. This year, and last actually few years, I've really been connecting with our assistive technology consultant a lot too. For some of our deafblind families, I have absolutely utilized Deafblind Central and their reading kits too. I've used LIO's reading kits. I've even requested just the papers so I could give them the book and keep it. Just so I'm all about whatever we can get families to get them going. And like I said, most of the time we're talking early on when these things are happening. So that's why I was thinking of that target audience specifically.
Yes, Kelly, thank you so much for sharing resources that are just available to everyone that you immediately have access to. But I've heard a few of you talk about maybe things that you had to research or find on your own, such as a class, et cetera. So I'm wondering now if you can kind of shift into how did you even do this? Did you just go looking for resources and stumble across things? Did you connect with people who said, hey, check this out? So if you could share with us just a little bit about other tools that you found that you want to highlight for the next several minutes, that would be fantastic.
This is Leanne. I'll just dive in. So I have often felt like I had to go searching for things, especially when deafblind started showing up for me more often. I attended a handful of trainings. One was on the other side of the state, even that was specifically a charge syndrome, which I had on my caseload and continue to have. So, and this year, I mentioned the assistive technology consultant. She did an AAC work group that I joined, and I was pretty much the outlier of the group. It was all speech paths and center-based teachers, and then me. But I really wanted that information so that I could support students. But I do feel like it's a lot of me just researching things, Googling things, reaching out to professional groups like the MSPS DHH group and asking for ideas. Even like I had asked Bethany what curriculums she was using during early on a few years ago, even just, so she's somebody I've actually reached out to with the question before.
This is
Kelly, thanks.
Heather.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is Heather. I too have taken some classes, like Bethany had mentioned. I took some online that were specific to certain extenuating disabilities that have popped up with my students, Asperger's, and a variety of other ones that have been very informative. And when taking those classes, I can think of that certain kid that's right there in my brain. Google is my best friend for looking up these, obscure or rare syndromes that pop up that some of our students have. But most recently, it's actually been the parents that have been my best resource. They've already done the research for their student. They know a lot. So starting with them, like, where did you learn all this information? They've been able to provide me with a lot, and I think we can't underestimate their knowledge.
This is Bethany. So the class I took was through Teachers Channel, and it was recommended to me, Teachers Channel in general was recommended to me from our transition coordinator that was here previously. And I was just overwhelmed with the amount of resources they had in special populations. So it took me a while to sift through everything, but I will definitely share the title. I will look it up again for you guys and share that out. But it wasn't specific for deaf and hard of hearing, but I went into the class with my deaf and hard of hearing focus and how I can adapt things and change things to work for our students. And the major takeaway that I took from that entire class is simple is okay. We don't need to make things complicated. When we think about our students in general, I think of communication and how are we getting these kids who are nonverbal and potentially wheelchair bound to be able to communicate. I use a lot of Big Mac switches, I use head switches, but then how do we get them to express like, hey, how are you doing? It could be simple as having the student be the teacher during transition, like every transition, okay, now it's time to go to gym every day. That's the student's job. Or in the morning, greet their friends as they're coming in, and say, hi, how are you? Or just getting used to using that switch and giving them consistent opportunities. There's probably so much more I could talk about right now with that class, but I will stop there.
Thank you so much for sharing. I was just jotting down some notes as all three of you were talking. And I think just hearing you say it's the consistency, it's finding a system and trying something, but knowing that it's okay to stop and make changes along the way. Sometimes we get so stuck as IEP teams and this is what we're supposed to be doing. This is what we're doing for this kid. And we don't deviate and follow the child's lead on what works for them. And sometimes what the child understands receptively doesn't match how they're going to expressively communicate. And I've heard a few of you talk about that. I'm wondering if anyone wants to add any of their personal experiences with that.
This is Heather. Sorry, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. I was just going to say my best tool has been observing, getting in that classroom and observing. I don't typically take my students one-on-one that are DHH plus, the more significant needs, but being in that classroom so that I can be more hands-on and see what's actually happening throughout their day, but observing them also with the extra providers that they have, going with them when they're with their OT, with their PT, so we can talk about that acoustic environment that they're working in. Going past that auditory base, the language component, we really have to be a team effort. That's what I'm finding with so many of my students. Some have AAC, some are auditory verbal, some use a core board, some are starting to do some, I have a couple that are doing some receptive signing, but they have some expressive there. So it definitely is a team effort, but try to work on that core listening base first.
Yeah, this is Leanne. I actually do push-in for some of my students. So that 4-year-old that I was referencing, she's one I do push-in for during preschool. It gives me an opportunity to model AAC, and if she does decide to use sign language expressively, which she knows a handful of signs, like there's a communication partner right there ready to respond to that and encourage her to keep going. So push-in has been a really big help on that, because again, you're seeing what the staff is doing too, and you're showing them what you want to see.
This is Bethany. For my student in particular, she is currently in middle school. She just recently started working with an interpreter. This time last school year, she was eating in her classroom as like a center base, but in our general education school. And she was not communicating. She would not follow directions. But once we were able to put an interpreter in with her, she's now in the lunchroom, getting her own lunch, taking care of her trash on her own, but then also is starting to use that AAC device because the interpreter is giving her that consistent receptive language, but also expecting her to use that expressive language through the AAC device as well. It's just been amazing to see the growth that she's had within the past year.
Thank you for sharing. I just feel like there's a consistent theme here of breaking down some silos and not saying that's not my job. Oh, they're using this device that's outside of my wheelhouse. It is diving in and learning those tools and being able to model and support, and then apply your DHH knowledge and expertise to share with the team as well. So I just commend all of you for all of your efforts and supporting students who are DHH plus. Our time went so quickly for this portion, but I want to give you just a last minute if there's anything else that you would like to add to this conversation or something that you wanted to say today. The floor is yours to make some final comments.
This is Leanne. I always jump in right away. I don't like to wait. Doing some AAC training this year has been absolutely helpful. It really changed my practice with it. It's not that I didn't know about it, didn't utilize, didn't support, but spending some really quality time looking at it and really thinking about implementation and who's going to do what has been incredibly helpful. So sometimes seeking that little extra training is worth it.
This is Bethany again. I was gonna take what Leanne was just saying and talk about the AAC conference in Michigan. I have not had the pleasure of going yet, but I would love to. I heard that the next one is coming up November 5th, 4th through the 5th. I'm sorry. So I would really like to try it and get there next year, or this fall, I should say, and see some more people. The other thing I was going to say is I feel like some of us have had training in foundations for literacy. In one way that I have tried to incorporate that with my students who have additional needs was to use more of five senses approach. So I took the same lesson, but then I added in the sense of smell, the sense of touch, the sense of taste, and I'm sure Beth Kennedy will probably talk about this in a little bit too. But it was just very simple things to add in, so that way we're still exposing our kids to literacy.
This is Heather. I think the final step that this population reminds me more and more of is the importance of patience and what we call wait time, giving that additional processing time, looking for those little cues that maybe they've understand, looking for those behavioral cues that are showing you that, there's a lot going on in there and we just need to trust the process.
Thank you, ladies, so much for, again, just sharing your personal experiences and the resources that you found. I know that your firsthand experiences and sharing is going to empower people today who are listening. And we all know that providers just want to do what's best. And sometimes that just means expanding our own growth and knowledge on areas. So thank you again for your time today. I respect all of you and the time that you took out to make some notes and prepare for sharing today. So just a few quick tools that I wanted to highlight, whether they were mentioned in the conversation that just happened or through some email exchanges beforehand. The first one is optimizing outcomes. And many of you may know this as the Purple Book. So this is put out by the National Association of State Directors of Special Education. And it is guidance for students who are deaf and hard of hearing. So there are many, many pages and lots of information in this, but I wanted to draw your attention to this quote from chapter 5 that says, "The expectation is that most students who are deaf and hard of hearing, including those who are deaf with additional disabilities, can achieve the same or higher levels as their peers. Professionals should maintain high expectations for the achievement of these students." And I feel like that was just kind of a theme today of our conversation as well. So that tool was just shared in the chat. Thank you, Amanda. So if you're not familiar with that, go ahead and bookmark it. There's lots of great information in there. And LIO has done some deeper dives into certain chapters of that book if you're interested. The other tool that I wanted to highlight, I saw some questions in the chat coming through about how do you have these conversations. One tool that teams can consider is the Michigan Communication Plan for students who are deaf and hard of hearing. This tool was developed in 2020, and it's intended to help facilitate conversations about what's happening right now. Is it working or is it not? What does home communication look like versus what does school communication look like? And just helping teams have really thoughtful conversations and dig a little deeper into specific factors. So at this time, I would like to hand it over to Beth Kennedy, who is going to share some additional resources that DV Central has for this topic. Welcome, Beth.
Hi, thank you. So you can all see my screen now, not Kelly's, right? So I'm Beth Kennedy. I'm the director and educational consultant for Deafblind Central. Michigan's Training and Resource Project. And I'm really pleased today to have the opportunity to have heard people mentioning DB Central as a resource they've used. For those of you who are unfamiliar or uncertain about DB Central, I can tell you that we're funded by the United States Department of Education, and that allows us to provide free support across the whole state of Michigan. So as I'm talking, if you're thinking about accessing services, you don't have to talk to your administrator about how are we going to pay for this. Everything that DB Central does is free. And we are year-round. So if you are a program that offers summer school, or if you're on a modified schedule, we're here for you, even throughout the summer. And our services include training. So we do general things like this, where we talk about our project, or we explain the range of students who qualify as deafblind. It's a huge umbrella. And then we also can go all the way down to student-specific types of training. Now, of course, to do student-specific services, we have to have a signed consent form from the student's family. It's just a one-page form, and it's easy to get. Usually, parents are very eager to have the school team and even themselves involved in training to better support their child. So usually not a barrier. Then consultation is another piece, and that is typically student-centered and requires a consent form. And that's where we would do a virtual or an in-person observation of how different activities are going for the student who's deafblind. And then we meet with the team and we say, you know what, you all know the student. I've just popped in for a little slice of the day. But based on your knowledge of the student and my knowledge of deafblindness, let's have a conversation. Let's talk this out to see how we could tweak what's happening so that you can feel even better about the support that you're providing for that child. And then information and referral. Our website is our primary mode for that, though we do some mailing and emailing, and some of you might have been the recipients of some of those. Our website is where I know that Leanne was one of the people who mentioned our story boxes. And so I hope to show you real quick how to access those. But the information on our website is intended to kind of be just a quick sort of place where you can go and say, okay, I need to learn more about interveners who are trained to work one-on-one with kids who are deafblind. I'm going to go over to DB Central and see how that works and where they're working in Michigan, how they're trained. That's all there. And then if you have questions beyond that, then you can contact the project. If you want to borrow a story box, you can do that on our website. If you, lots of people go to Google and, lots of information at your fingertips, but sometimes it's so much to sort through. So you'd rather just call up someone and say, hey, could you point me in the direction of a really good resource or a few good things that I can read and use to get to know my student better? And that's what we're here for. And then we also do systems change. So in addition to working with teams and helping people understand deafblindness, we're also working with the agencies and organizations in Michigan and beyond to make sure that as they're making their rules and policies and decisions, that they're including kids who are deafblind, so that, parents don't have to fight so hard and teachers don't have to do that advocacy to make sure that all the student needs are met. That's on us. And some of you are aware we are currently conducting our census, which we have to do every single year. So you may receive our packets or follow-up emails or phone calls to say, hey, help us find the updated information on this child. And the reason we do that is because anyone, I'll go to my next slide here, but deafblindness, as I mentioned, is a huge umbrella. And so lots of kids qualify as deafblind, regardless of what their IEP eligibility might be. And so for you all, you might have a lot of students who have DHH, deaf, hard of hearing, as their IEP eligibility. But that person might have additional disabilities, right? That's why we're here talking today. If that one of those additional disabilities is a vision loss, then they probably can receive services from DB Central. But Michigan Department of Ed, in looking at their data, if you looked at students who are deafblind in Michigan and you did a sort for deafblind eligibility on an IEP, you'd probably find around 30 students, which is not many, and when you're considering the whole state. But the fact of the matter is, the census that DB Central conducts, we have 309, which is still tiny, right? But it's way more than 30. And so that's why that census is important. And on this slide here, you can see to receive services, you have to be supporting someone who's deafblind. So we're not just talking about those 30 kids with deafblind as their IEP eligibility. We're talking about the 309. A lot of your Deaf Plus students that people were describing on today's panel could qualify for project services. So that's the only requirement. To access our free support, you would need to have a student registered with us. Now, that's for the student-specific support. But let's say you wanted to talk to your administrator and said, I just learned about this federal grant that provides free training. We have some PD days coming up. Why don't we connect with DB Central to come out and talk to us about who kind of qualifies as deafblind and sort of the general supports that might work for someone who's deafblind. And then we can go from there and decide who in your population should be registered with DB Central if they're not already, and then work to get some parent consent forms so we can do student-specific support. But one thing I really like to emphasize is when we're conducting the census, we always hear people say, but yeah, well, what do I get from DB Central? And the reality is we can do a whole range of things to support you, from those student-specific observations to offering mini grants that you can get some funding to buy some tools that will help you support your students. But nothing will happen unless you contact us and request the service. So there are 309 kids that we know of, and that's not a lot, but the DB Central staff is actually really small. And so we can only work with the people who contact us and express an issue or have questions. And if we don't hear from you, we're just assuming that everything's going swimmingly and everything is fine and you don't have any questions about deafblindness. And that could be true, but I think sometimes it's that people don't realize that unless they reach out to us, you won't hear from us. We do try to do some mailings and emails to remind people that we're here, but the reality is we count on you to let us know when you need help. So the population is really diverse. And so if you're a seasoned teacher or consultant and you've been working away for many years and have met lots of students with various support needs, you may have still only encountered one or two kids who are deafblind. Chances are those two people had very different support needs. And chances are if you get more students in the future, they're going to look very different than the students you've had in the past. And so there's really no shame, no matter how many years you've been doing this, in contacting us to say, I really could use some ideas on how to support these students that I now have. Up here on the slide are just some of the ways that the population is diverse. You have lots of degrees of vision loss and hearing loss that do qualify. Virtually any hearing loss, and as long as the vision loss cannot be completely corrected with glasses or contacts, then that person is probably eligible. So that would include severe acuity loss, the blurriness, as well as field loss. And it also includes progressive losses. So someone might have very good vision now, but you know, according to their file, that their vision is going to progress over time. Even right now, that person can be supported by DB Central. So age of onset, if you're born deafblind, you're going to have much different effect than if you become deafblind after you develop language. The amount of and kind of educational intervention you've received, what's going on in your family, socioeconomic background, all those things come into play and create, even though it's a tiny population, create a huge amount of diversity. This is my contact information. It includes the website. So since I'm not out of time, I'm just going to pop over to the website and show you what some people have mentioned, which is our story time. So this is our homepage. And when you first go in, you can see there's this huge banner up top. And CMU has standardized all the websites for all of the offices on campus. So we don't have control over this top part here. But if you scroll down, you get to the deafblind specific area. So try not to hit those top buttons or it takes you to different offices at CMU. This is what you want. So you can get our brochure here. You can learn about our services and share those with the team and the family. And what I really want to show you is if we click here, this is story time. And these are the books that were mentioned. So we have I think that we have 30 titles now, 30 kids books that have multiple levels to promote literacy. So we have the actual book, we have the book in Braille, then we have someone reading the story aloud. If your student is hard of hearing and accesses receptive through English, then they can take advantage of that. We also have a deaf adult who performs each story in fluent ASL. And then we have a PowerPoint presentation for each book where people can learn some of the vocabulary associated with the story, again, in English as well as ASL. And then for students who are emergent communicators, who are the most concrete communicators, we have boxes, experience boxes that go with each story. And we've really searched long and hard to find objects that are good matches to the pictures and the storylines. And so we loan these out through the grant, free of charge. So you log into the website, you peruse the stories, and you decide which ones would be great for your student or your whole class. And then you just click on one, like if we click on if you give a dog a donut, it scrolls down and you can see links to the various levels. If you want to just use the videos, you don't even have to contact us. You can just click on it on the website. If you want to borrow the book in the box, you just click on borrow the experience box. There's a link to our email and you click on that and you say, I'd like to borrow if you give a dog a donut. And then we send it to you. And when you're done, we arrange a pickup and the UPS comes and gets it from you, no charge to you. So that's one of the things on our website. And I see Kelly has popped up, which means my time is done. But I would love to talk to any of you. So contact me for more information.
Certainly don't want to cut you off from sharing these amazing resources, but I'm so thankful that you transitioned to the website to show those things off because it's great information for all of us to have. So next, I would like to introduce Sarah Pericolosi from Alt Shift, who is going to share some additional resources. And Sarah, if you can just plan to wrap up with like 2 minutes to spare, I will close us out after that.
Sounds great. I will do my best. So hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Pericolosi. I am from Alt Shift. And one of the things that I loved hearing from our presenters today is how much they mentioned AAC, or augmentative and alternative communication. And that is a lot of what we talk about at Alt Shift. I recognize that we are running close on time, so I'm going to drop a link in the chat, and that will give you a handout to everything in our slide deck. So if there's something you want to dig into a little bit deeper, those resources are there for you. So first off, these are some different ways that you can engage with Alt Shift. I'm going to take a minute to kind of walk through each of them. If you haven't heard from us before, I challenge you to come look at our website and see if there is something there for you. One of the things that we have is we have a lending library that is available to anyone in public schools to trial and use with our students. So we have assistive technology around augmentative and alternative communication. So if you are looking for a device for your student, we have switches, we have math manipulatives. So if you're thinking, how do I make this easier for our students to learn? We have manipulatives in there as well. So I challenge you to go look at our website, look at our lending library, because there are a variety of tools available. With Alt Shift, we also look at how can we make this information readily available to individuals at any time. And so we have a variety of online resources that do that. The first are our quick wins. And so these are really designed to be very brief videos that you can go to and say, hey, I have a student who has communication needs and I need a starting point. Where do I go? Go to our quick wins. You'll notice there's a mix of videos and text, and it's really this idea of easy to implement strategies that can get you started today. I'm going to say thank you to my counterpart, Carolyn Parker, who's dropping all these links for you in the chat as well. So please bookmark them if you're intrigued. We offer technical assistance. So if you have a specific question about a student, if you're wondering about a resource, you can go online and fill out our technical assistance question, and it will get to the right people, and we will reach out and have a conversation with you. We also offer online modules. So I've seen a lot around, hey, I want to dive deeper into AAC. Where do I go? How do I learn this information? Those modules are there for you. We have a module on accessible digital materials. So how do we ensure the materials we're creating for our students are accessible to all? We have our AT journey, or assistive technology journey, that looks at how do we develop a consistent assistive technology team, the consideration process. We focus on autonomous communication for all learners. And lastly, we talk about math. How do we teach math in a way that's meaningful for all students? So you can check out our online modules. Those are free and available to anyone. You just have to create an account. We have our Alt Shift newsletter, so we're constantly sending out blurbs, resources, things that are happening throughout the state. So we encourage you to sign up. You can follow us on social media. We are on Facebook and Instagram, and so we post frequent resources, questions that we're receiving, celebrations from around the state of great things that educators are doing. So some upcoming events, you can always find us at statewide events. We are going to drop a link to our website where we have all of our upcoming events. But right now, we've heard a lot today about the importance of partnering with families and how they can truly impact our students' education. And we recognize that too. So we are partnering with Michigan Alliance for Families for our summer event this year to really talk about reimagining how we can capitalize on that partnership with families to support learners. And the last way to engage with Alt Shift is our most meaningful area. And we recognize that we need to shift our adult mindsets, that we need to shift our practices to ensure that we're meeting the needs of all learners. And that can happen in an individual implementer level. We've heard from a lot of phenomenal teachers today. But our goal is that this is system-wide. This is how we do business. And so we work to partner with intermediate school districts to not only pull in that professional learning, but to take a deeper look at what are the systems and structures in place to ensure that this becomes the way that we do business. This is how we support all learners to ensure that they have access to knowledgeable others. So if you are interested in learning how to do this across all of the buildings in your ISD, all of those districts, you can fill out a partnership inquiry form, or you can reach out to us at AltShift. And this comes down to, why do we do what we do? And it's really to improve the educational outcomes of all learners across the state. So we encourage you to reach out. If you're not familiar, check out our website. We have a variety of resources and tools. And if there's something that's missing that you're wondering about, please reach out and ask us to give you those resources. All right, Miss Kelly, I gave you more than 2 minutes.
This is Kelly. Sarah, thank you so much for just sharing AltShift with us and the resources that you have available. I do want to let everyone know that we are able to pull all those links from the chat, and we will make sure they're shared in the resource document. So don't feel like you have to frantically copy and paste things. That is also the reason that I'm not going to go through all of the things listed in the next few slides, because they will be linked in a resource document that's provided to anyone who is registered for the call today. I've heard a lot of you talk about professional development opportunities, and I wanted to highlight some additional opportunities that you can look into, whether they're nationwide or in our state. And so there are some things listed on this slide that will be provided in your resource handout, whether it's modules through the National Center for Deafblindness or Success for Kids with Hearing Loss, or physical conferences that you may go to or participate virtually. Additionally, there are some checklists that you may or may not be familiar with, and all of those things will be linked in the handout that you're provided. Inclusion checklists, educational plan checklists, we will make sure that you have access to all of those things in the resource handouts. We also wanted to share with you a few family resources, and specifically highlight an event that Michigan Hands and Voices has coming up on April 23rd for a DHH Parent Plus connection. So you might be able to just share that with your families. That's also being shared in the chat right now, but know that there are resources as well as events that can be shared with families that are looking for more support in this area. The next few slides just highlight some upcoming activities and events that LIO has. I'm not going to read through them today because if you are subscribed to our emails, which you can do from our website, you will be getting all this information in your email. So you'll have access to all of this information. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who has taken time to complete our field surveys, though that information is used to drive our PD options that we'll offer for next year. And lastly, I wanted to let you know that as this webinar closes right at 1 o'clock, a link to the Zoom survey will pop up. And we so appreciate you taking time to just complete those surveys for us as we continue to grow and provide additional PD opportunities to you for next school year. So with that, we'll close out this year's Live with LIO series. And I thank you all for participating, all of our panelists, as well as all of you who are on the call today. Thanks so much.